Welcome back. Just want to bring you some live pictures now. Obviously, all eyes on Moscow today as President Xi Jinping of China arrives for a 3.
Chào mừng bạn đến với ứng dụng radio tin tức 24 giờ. Ứng dụng radio tin tức 24 giờ cung cấp cho bạn những trải nghiệm tin tức audio tuyệt vời nhất với những giọng đọc truyền cảm của các biên tập viên. Ứng dụng sẽ mang đến cho bạn những trải nghiệm nghe tin tức tuyệt vời nhất. Bạn yêu thích các thể loại tin khác nhau, không cần phải lo lắng. Chúng tôi cập nhật thường xuyên để bạn luôn nghe được những tin tức mới nhất. Không chỉ đón đầu các tin tức nóng hổi 24 giờ, ứng dụng luôn cập nhật những tin tức về thị trường tài chính bất động sản trong nước cũng như thế giới, cùng đầy đủ các danh mục khác nhau như thế giới, đời sống, văn hóa, sức khỏe, quân sự, thể thao, pháp luật. Ứng dụng radio tin tức 24 giờ đang hoàn toàn miễn phí và có sẵn trên chợ ứng dụng Google Play. Đường dẫn tải ứng dụng trong phần mô tả video. Chúc các bạn một ngày nhiều niềm vui.
Day state visit. It's the Chinese leader's first trip to Russia since the start of the war in Ukraine. President Putin has said that Russia and China are both fighting common threats. Our Moscow correspondent Diana Magne joins us now. This is a very, very significant visit indeed, isn't it?
Yes, a very important diplomatic moment, really. We're seeing the Chinese leader come down and be met with a sort of ceremonial honours at the airport here in Moscow, met by a deputy prime minister. But as you say, it will be a substantial visit, his first since President Putin invaded Ukraine. And, you know, this visit was announced on Friday just after President Putin was indicted by the International Criminal Court. You would have thought that that might give the Chinese premier cause for thought, but apparently not. And let's not forget that he too is accused of war crimes in Guangzhou province against the Uyghur minority there. They are expected to talk trade. They are expected to talk their substantial growing economic ties. But this is not a partnership of equals. This is a partnership where Russia is very much the junior partner, isolated on the world stage, looking for Russia as a market to sell its gas and its energy. China is getting that at substantially reduced prices. And of course, this is also a moment where both leaders want to show, and especially Xi Jinping, want to show that they are a peace broker in terms of the Ukraine war. The Ukraine crisis is the way that Xi Jinping names this. He hasn't called it a war. He hasn't condemned Russia. He hasn't accused Russia of being the aggressor in this, but he has laid out a very vague peace plan, which I think Ukraine, for one, finds impossible to countenance because it would just acknowledge Russia's territorial gains over the last year. But I think that the Chinese sort of advisors are pretty clear that at this stage there will be no halt to the war because both parties want to see whether they can make more gains before they'll be prepared to sit down and actually talk for peace. But I think Xi Jinping wants to project himself as a key player in any resolution of this conflict. And of course, we've had editorials from both sides, from President Putin and Xi Jinping already in each other's respective major newspapers where they've talked about the threat that they both face from American hegemony, from bullying, and how they are committed to world peace and a multipolar world order. And that is very much for the audience in the global south. But I think, you know, this is really a boost for Vladimir Putin to have the Chinese leader come to see him 1 year into his war. They've declared themselves a partnership with no limits. We'll have to see whether that is the case. I think that there are concerns, of course, from America that Xi Jinping will be providing and discussing at this meeting, providing Russia with weapons to fuel its war effort. There's been reporting last week from Politico that China was already providing rifles to Russia, and there are other dual-use technologies that are coming in to support Russia's efforts. That really would crystallise much more of a Cold War situation with Russia and China against NATO. I don't think China wants to be seen to go that far, particularly because of the importance for China of continuing its economic ties with Europe and with the rest of the world. but everybody will be watching very closely the outcome of these meetings. Tomorrow we'll get more out of it than today. Today there are informal talks between the Chinese leader and Vladimir Putin. Tomorrow both sides' delegations will meet. There will be substantial talks. There will be a press conference. So there'll be a lot of news coming from Russia over the next couple of days.
Di, you mentioned just now Xi's ambitions as a sort of peace broker. Obviously, we've seen that in the Middle East last week, brokering talks between the Saudis and the Iranians. We're told that he is going to be speaking to President Zelensky of Ukraine by telephone at some point. Do we get any sort of readout from the Chinese as to when that's going to take place?
Not yet. Presumably after these calls, after these talks with Vladimir Putin, you would have thought that given President Biden's unexpected appearance in Kyiv a couple of weeks back, it wouldn't be a bad opportunity for the Chinese leader to do the same thing. But the expectation is that it will just be a phone call with Volodymyr Zelensky, who has said in the past, when China put out its peace proposals, that he would be happy to discuss them going forward with China. But it does seem very one-sided that you have this huge state visit from the Chinese leader, a sort of pat on the back for Vladimir Putin, who's called him his good old friend. Xi Jinping's been slightly more restrained in his terminology in the letter that he wrote about this meeting. And that he'll just make a telephone call to Kyiv. But it's better than nothing. And I think that is, the expectations that he can actually play a role in brokering peace at the moment are pretty limited, basically because neither side is really looking for peace quite yet. But it is possible that he will be able, if he believes or wants it, to weigh in, as this situation continues.